Afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about my second book, Temporary Champions. Came out on Main Street Rag, um, and actually, the the cover started off as there was a lot of trepidation. I'd never picked art from like a site before. They had a password to like an art thing, and it you know you get to pick. You pay for the service, and you can utilize any of these art for covers and things like that. And I'd help put together the cover art for As We Refer to Our Bodies. And it was an Ohio flag that I'd written Ohio #5 on, and took a picture of it and turned it into cover art. And so the cover for this, I was real worried that picking art from a database was going to be a real negative experience. But we found, I was a big fan of the gloves and the gray background and everything, and it worked out really well. This was an experience for me that was really positive. M. Scott Douglas and Main Street Rag, I thought did a really good job. If you haven't gotten to meet M. Scott yet, he is he's a great guy. He's a lot of fun, and he's published a ton of poetry over the years. And it's still good to see him at AWP and different places. And they did a really good job with Temporary Champions, which was the first ever project I did that required a great amount of research. Essentially, everything started with there's a Sun Kill Moon song about Ray Mancini and Duk Koo Kim, and I always loved that band and would listen to that song a lot, and decided that I was curious enough to go through and start to do a little research, especially when I found out that Ray Mancini was an Ohio kid, grew up in northern Ohio, and came sort of out of nothing to become a champ, which for the purposes of this book was sort of the entry point. But and I think everyone should go and try to write a project that requires a deep amount of research. A lot of us, have an academic background and get used to doing that kind of thing. And especially when you find a real tether to pull on, something where you're fascinated with what happened, right? And I became pretty fascinated with the story of this title fight, which ended in the death of Duk Koo Kim, the Asian champion. And this is back when I'm not a boxing guy. I don't care. I can't tell you anything about the modern day boxing setup or who's champion of what. But I was fascinated by all the things that happened before and during the fight and after the fight, and learned all these tremendous and terrifying things about the men involved, and all the things that led to someone dying on national television. Because this is when boxing, would be on CBS or ABC. It would be Saturday night, and there would be a title fight somewhere in Vegas or Reno or New York at Madison Square Garden, and they would put it on national television. And this fight, was on national TV, and a man died, and so they had to sort of revisit a lot of things after this fight. But the stories of the men involved and all the things that lead up to what we talk about when we talk about masculinity and violence and sport and all those things, was really interesting to me. And how much is it worth? What do we do to young men when we make them fight like this? Isn't the end of it can only end with blood, right? This can only be a path to death and glory. And how much is that glory really worth? Death and money, and how much do you get out of the money? But the people involved and all the men that sort of tried to prop this up and continue to prop up this form of violence and masculinity for money and sport. And what do we get out of that, really? in the end, I became much more fascinated with the people and the two fighters, and sort of the path that led them to be in. They built a new arena for this. Duk Kim didn't have a ton of experience, like 20 fights, and he ended up the Asian champion. And his path here and his family, he had a mother who kept trying to marry for money, and it kept never happening. And then all of a sudden her son is a champion. All of a sudden she has a chance at riches, and she's over the moon about it. And when Duk Kim died in the 14th round, it wasn't a cumulative thing. A lot of boxing, you take a beating, and then eventually, something happens you just can't come back from. And this was like two direct blows. If they had stopped the fight after 13 rounds, everyone lives. But what happened here was he came out for the 14th, took two shots, and died as a result of one of them. And because of this, his mother committed suicide. Like her golden ticket, her son was dead now, and she didn't have it in her to like keep trying to, I don't know, find comfort. His girlfriend, who turned out to be pregnant, kept holding these press conferences, and all this crazy stuff would happen where she'd talk about the champion in her belly, because she was trying to get death benefits from the Korean government. And Ray Mancini, the Ohio kid, where all this stuff started, he killed a man. He talks about how he buried the memory of all that. But he eventually met Duk Kim's son, and they shook hands, and his son forgave Ray. But this was the end. He'd been Ohio's champion. He'd been the champ for a while and made a lot of money, and his best friend was like Sylvester Stallone for a while, and he tried to do like movie productions and things like that, and never really. This was sort of the end of the road for him. He fought a few more times after this, lost a couple of them, and was sort of done. But his whole path, like Bob Arum and all of these promoters and managers and his dad and these things, he was going to fight. He was going to be a fighter. There wasn't, that choice was sort of made for him, and he was good at it. He was a talented guy. He was a world champ, right? But that kind of acclaim and money and all these things to destroy other men, it's a pretty complicated scenario in the best of cases. And so, when the referee, who, by the way, another tangent, but, had a connection to the mob and ended up killing himself with a gun, he shot himself. So like of the three men in this ring, two of them died, and one of them had to live with the terror of taking a life and all that guilt. And, I think he had a pretty decent life, but you're on national television killing a person, that's gonna stay with you forever. So all of these things and sort of the craziness, and every time I looked deeper and deeper into the project and tried to figure out how to approach, and I'd start off by doing individual poems, sort of standalones, and then I found the spine, and I was talking about this in the last video with As We Refer to Our Bodies, finding a way to get it to stand up on its own with some great standalone poems. I did the crowd sequence in this one, which I used to read just like tear through. It's 20 some crowd poems, and I had it timed, and I had special sheets with like rising and falling action that I would read from, and really sort of put on my own kind of fight in the reading. I used to love to perform that over and over again, and had it down, and really sort of put the spectacle on trial a little bit. Had all these people that put on pearls and furs and went to this brand new ring setup built specifically for this fight in Reno to accommodate the cameras, and Sinatra and all these people, famous people, showing up for this fight because it was the biggest fight in the country, right? And so what does it mean when we put on our finery to go watch a man be beaten, or watch two men beat each other, or in this case to go to a funeral? Essentially, I'm going to put on my jewels to watch a man beaten to death. So the crowd sequence was key for me for this one, and really, it became its own sort of performance thing. It became me in a ring kind of deal. Um, and I have my own athletic past, and pluses and minuses from being an athlete as long as I was in high school and college and things like that. And um, I think we are right to examine these men that coach us, and right to examine what we do to ourselves and our bodies, and what we do to other people's bodies in the process. And um, the more we can be considerate and try to be generative with new ideas for what it means to be for sport, and what it means to be an athlete, and what it means, when we're in the metaphor doing combat. And I'm still working on it. I've got kids that play sports, and it's pretty complicated. A lot of complicated feelings about it. But they're baseball and basketball and softball players and volleyball and gymnasts and things like that. No one's getting in the ring. I don't think I'd ever be comfortable with that. But this was a pretty epic story, and something I spent a lot of time researching, and it was great to get to write the poems and sort of end up at a point where I did, where, in the parlance of boxing, I came to a decision. I never liked boxing. I hate it. After doing the research to this, it's just not worth it. None of it's worth it. I know there's a lot of money. There's a lot of folks making a lot of money off these people beating each other. And folks paying for the tickets and showing up, and a lot of that was the impetus to the crowd sequence and all the different things this book talked about. And it was a good experience, the publishing and the release of it. And again, for picking something out of a database, this is a pretty incredible cover. So thank you to M. Scott Douglas and the folks at Main Street Rag Publishing. And it was a really good experience in the end. I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot in the research, as I said. If you ever look into the story of all the things that happened, highly encourage you to read some books about it or do some research on your own. And it is just, it's wild. The whole thing is a little crazy. Anyway, so I'm going to read 4 poems from this. I appreciate you folks checking out the second video, my book number 2 here, Temporary Champions, from Main Street Reg. So yeah, I'm going to read 4 poems from this. Again, I appreciate you folks watching these. It's been fun so far to see the reactions, as I'm doing 19 of these. So I'm glad you folks are enjoying them. Because I tried to like it very much. I watch it now, the fight, almost every day, fight the urge to map the blows and guess where the weakness first decided it was not welcomed by men like this, men that fight out of instinct, poor men raised on fighting to be men. And I still watch it, the fight, unable to root for Mancini, unable to root for Kim to beat him. I watch it now almost every day, knowing the last 2 rights are coming, knowing the canvas will double as a coroner's bag, knowing that my vision of what a man really is can be found in round 13, but learning that I am not much of an enthusiast for what it is men can do. How vital sport. It has to be something. The poverty, the many fathers and miles of family held up by canvas, canvassed by the other bloke. I think the whole worlds of the fighters should stand in the corner with them. Teacher, trainer, mother, and the spectacle should be forced to fit inside the bucket of humanity, what's left of it. It has to be something more than what it looks like, or we have taken warriors, men who could be great men if they lived long enough, men led around like horses, beaten like horses, buried like soldiers, with no flag. Unanimous decision. The hero kills, the other hero dies. We love it. An emphatic taking of life. Nobody knew the cook and hurt of this fight would domino into the first row, that Kim's mother knew a life without a champion was misery, that the referee kept a handgun hidden in the house to protect himself from one more round of it, one more bell he couldn't unring. Let me begin again. We all knew that a cheer for death, a loud cheer, a cheer by thousands for death, to lessen the ring, to drag his feet, taking Kim, to multiply the toll beneath his wings, to plant his bony claws into the sport, and give us all what we wanted, one fleeting moment where we saw the possibility of two men lining themselves into violent, graphic angels. That was all desire, wasn't it? Temporary champions. Took a lot longer to write this one. Not as much time as the first book to get published, but took a lot longer to write, that's for sure. A lot of research and time, and I'm pretty thrilled with how it turned out, and took some definite steps as a young poet putting it together, and yeah, real proud of this one. So I appreciate you folks watching, and I'll be back. I've got 17 more of these to record. It's been a lot of fun to revisit and get to do it with you folks. So thank you.